Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to Malvern today for our County Council Cabinet meeting. Welcome to members of the public who are attending, and obviously all of our other stakeholders are here. Apologies and declarations of interest. I've got one apology from Karen May, who's unfortunately attending a funeral today of a good friend. I know we wish her well at the difficult time. Mark.
Thank you, Leader. Devolution will potentially make some differences to the Police and Crime Commissioner's role, and so I just declare my interest as the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Similar one, Steve? Okay, those will be noted. Any other declarations of interest? I don't see any. No. So, public participant? None registered to speak. So, we've got the minutes of the last meeting, which were on the 6th of February. Colleagues happy to note those are true and accurate reflection of the meeting? Yeah, I think we've got enough nods, so I'll sign them as chair. Right, we have one substantive item on the Cabinet today, and that's the Devolution Local Government Reform in Worcestershire paper. So I'll just move the recommendations formally set out, one little A through to H on the other side on page 2. We had a really good OSPB meeting, and I want to publicly thank Tom for chairing an excellent meeting the other day up in Wyre Forest, and Noban Tom in terms of points and reflections on the board. But just to set out the background, obviously the government wrote to councils signalling the end of two-tier local government in the remaining 21 counties that have two-tier local governments back in December, setting out the English devolution white paper. And that had the notion of strategic authorities of around 1.5 million or more, and a principle of new unitary authorities being created of 500,000 or more. And at that stage, as I set out to OSPB, the government asked for expression of interest from counties that wish to move at a faster pace, either on the devolution priority programme or indeed fast track LGR to unlock devolution. As colleagues will know, we expressed an interest along with 16 out of the 21 authorities. The government made a decision on those. We're not one of those councils that they chose to take forward, but in a subsequent letter, an invitation to reorganise to all authorities within the 21 footprint, they invited, if I use those words, authorities to put forward interim arrangements and interim plan by tomorrow, indeed. And so councils, not just the county councils, but all authorities in those areas have been invited to consider and put forward proposals. We've met on a number of occasions now as the Worcestershire Leaders Board, and I've had some very good discussions with my district leader colleagues. We've worked together over many years, obviously as districts and counties, try and manage that interface between services across Worcestershire, putting the public first, making sure that we make the most efficient, effective use of resources in the two-tier system. And I'd want to say, colleagues, that obviously as a district leader of some 9 years previously, as well as now having led the County Council for over 9 years, I understand this is a difficult time for colleagues across Worcestershire, as it is in those other 21 counties, because services that they've worked hard on and plans they've developed in the locality, which they're proud of, equally as we are proud of our Worcestershire County Council and its really excellent delivery of services and value for money that it delivers to the taxpayer, that cannot continue. The government couldn't be clearer that it's the end of two-tier local government. So we have a duty, I think, to work as collaboratively as possible, and that's what we've done in Worcestershire. And there's a number of points that are set out in the report that we agree on, and I just want to bring those out for colleagues. Over the meetings, we have now developed a set of issues that we agree on. Of course, we don't know whether the government will agree on, and so those can't be taken as read that they will be agreed by government. And I know there are points of conflict in other places, but we haven't defined a strategic authority footprint in our interim plan or in the discussions with district colleagues. And that's because, of course, Worcestershire looks a number of different ways, and there's no agreement yet on a strategic authority footprint. That we do agree that the district council should be the building block for the unitary authorities. that ultimately no one is looking to redefine the district boundary in any proposal. We're also not looking to submit to government proposals that will affect other people's counties, other counties in our neighbouring area like Gloucestershire or Warwickshire. We're also agreed that we should be using the new county council divisional boundaries to be used for the elections in just a number of weeks' time now, as the basis for the electoral proposals. And we also agreed that the unitary structure for the elections for that shadow authority should take place in the 1st of April 2020, 1st of May or the Thursday afterwards, if it's later, in 2027 for those authorities to come into effect in the 1st of April 2028. So there's a number of things we agree on, but we all agreed to disagree on one of the fundamental issues, which is a single county proposal or two unitary model for Worcestershire, because there is no agreement on that. And in fact, in terms of the note that's been developed by the Leaders Board, we reflect dynamically the positions of each of the authorities, obviously as they have such meetings today, in terms of that. But colleagues will know, as a result of the invitation to reorganise, we've had an independent piece of work done by PwC, and I'd want to draw out that as part of my opening remarks, because it's such an important document. In fact, PwC are the consultancy that worked on a report back in 2020, looking at the 25, I think it was then, two-tier areas that existed, and brought forward a significant document at that time. And it's the document that the government refers to, in fact, in terms of their basis for reorganisation, that they believe there's a two-tier premium and that more effective and efficient and streamlined arrangements can be delivered by unitaries at better value for money, have a better connection in terms of accountability and services that are provided. PwC have refreshed that national piece of work for the CCN, and that's demonstrated actually the business case for reorganisation on the footprints that the government's talking about, that the case is even stronger than it was in 2020. But we believed in Worcestershire it was important to have our own piece of work that looked at Worcestershire, looked at the criteria. And the criteria, there's some detailed criteria that is set out in the report that was provided by government. And PwC have conducted that exercise, and it demonstrably proves that a single unitary for Worcestershire is the most effective and efficient response to the invitation to reorganise, particularly on the financial side, but not exclusively. And again, colleagues will no doubt bring this out in the debate. On the financial side, just for people who haven't scan-read all the document, there's a clear financial difference. One unitary council for Worcestershire firstly meets all the criteria, including the 500,000 or more. It keeps all the services that we have and we deliver. Some 86% of spend is on a Worcestershire footprint, and we deliver some of those really important services like children's and adult social care for the most vulnerable people in society, and maintain our roads, the education system, public health. We could talk about SEND, homeschool transport, all those kind of services are delivered at a Worcestershire footprint. So it keeps those together. You haven't got the disaggregation and diseconomies of scale. And importantly, in terms of the facts and the figures, there's some £20 million plus of ongoing savings that can be delivered from such a unitary authority for Worcestershire, whereas there's just over £4 million if we had two. Importantly, the payback period is over 11 years for two, as opposed to less than a year for one. So we believe that's a substantial piece of work to obviously engage the government on, but importantly engage the stakeholders and partners of Worcestershire, because it's important going forward that we engage the public. We haven't had enough time, obviously, from the invitation to reorganise to today to do public engagement consultation or detailed engagement with stakeholders and partners, and that was acknowledged with all of our colleagues. Our district colleagues in the same position. But that's an important thing in developing the final business case. And so what we believe as Worcestershire County Council is that we have enough evidence now to put forward an interim plan on the basis of the document that PwC has produced, to submit it, but also to note where we've got the points we agree on with our district partners and colleagues, and the points of disagreement, and that we obviously commit to work continue to work collectively to see if we can reach agreement on a final proposal to be submitted in November, but importantly instruct our officers and the resources of the County Council to focus on developing the final business case based on a single county unitary footprint, and obviously engaging members of the public and stakeholders, and importantly doing the work on devolution. And this was the other point I brought out at OSPB. Why is the government doing this? Yes, they believe it's more effective and efficient to have unitary councils, but they also see them as the building blocks for the new strategic authority with potentially a mayor. And as I said in my opening remarks, we're looking at a strategic authority of £1.5 million or more, and of course there's no agreement on what that footprint would be, but there is an important point, I think, that there needs to be dialogue and engagement with our stakeholders and partners that we surround to come to some form of view over that period, so at least we're clear with government how we fit in the overall jigsaw puzzle of England in terms of the devolution footprint they wish to see. So I think we've got a very clear case. I absolutely respect our colleagues in other places that respectfully disagree, but we had a very good session that brought out those points at OSPB, and I'm happy to say that I would absolutely note and agree with those comments which are made by OSPB. I think they're very thoughtful and reflective, and I'll bring in Tom later in the discussion to bring them out. But we had a good debate. Importantly, PwC were there online to be questioned by colleagues from across the spectrum, not just members of OSPB or the cabinet, but other people who came along in terms of members to be able to kick the tyres, if you like, on that business case, and see the issues that were pertinent to the debate. And so moving forward, as I said, that's what we want to do. We want to, once we've approved this, obviously it's for the new council then to take that forward, and we do make a commitment that Cabinet and Council, importantly, will be engaged in submitting the final business case, because there's a lot more work to do on the final business case. And I want to say that I think there's a real opportunity in Worcestershire to reimagine local government services working with our partners, not just to deliver a safe and legal new authority from a few years' time, but actually to reimagine how services are delivered in Worcestershire, to use the opportunity for unitarisation to get the best council for the area to deliver for the people we serve, to make sure that we can use those resources wisely and effectively, not just to deliver statutory services to a statutory minimum, but actually to continue to be able to do that place-shaping role in Worcestershire, the things that members of the public want us to see, and importantly members of the council get elected to do, the really important things in their community. I also recognise, as I said at OSPB, that in a unitary, particularly a Worcestershire unitary, if that's what is approved by government, and again I made the point, these are our thoughts, these are our proposals, it's for government to decide, ultimately, that we would want to reflect on the diversity of Worcestershire, and we'd want to make sure that we have appropriate arrangements within that model that allow members to represent their communities, get things done, recognise that we are a collection of different communities, some very, very rural, some very urban, and they will have different needs and demands, and they should be reflected as part of any document as well. And importantly, we need to think about our parish and town councils because they exist, and in many places in Worcestershire they're doing obviously an excellent job, but there might be other places where people want to consider a democratic form of local governance other than simply the local members that are elected to whatever the new authority is, to provide that real local place feel and democratic representation. So I've set out, I think, quite a lot of length in terms of the opening remarks, why we're putting forward the recommendations that we are. I've formally moved them, so I'll look to Marcus to second.
Thank you very much indeed, Leader, and good morning. Firstly, I will formally second the recommendations as set out in 1 little a to h inclusive on pages 1 and 2 of the agenda, and echo your comments and make a few of my own, if I may. It's really important that we get this right for future generations of residents across this county. This is going to be the largest, most fundamental reshaping of local government and restarting the map since 1972 and the Local Government Act. So this really is a once in a generation or once in several generation opportunity. And of course, it's worth reminding ourselves and indeed our wider electorate and communities that we didn't ask for this, but it's really important that now it's here that we do the best that we can with it. And indeed in the Labour government's manifesto that they took to the country last year, there was buried somewhere deep in that manifesto a reference to greater devolution, but it didn't actually talk about a whole-scale local government reorganisation. And I guess we need to look broadly at the bigger prize, that with local government reorganisation, we sincerely hope that we do genuinely get devolution. I mean, some people will quarrel at how close you are to the public when you ultimately have to have a strategic authority with an elected mayor and 1.5 million residents making up that strategic authority. But the long and the short of it is there's a clear policy direction by the government, and we must ensure that we do the very best that we can for our Worcestershire residents. Now, clearly, I speak as a member of Worcestershire County Council and its deputy leader, and therefore it will come as no surprise that I wholeheartedly endorse this recommendation and indeed the position of the County Council in the submission of the interim plan to government, which of course needs to be submitted by the 21st of March. A whole host of work has been done by PwC, and indeed I think in the government's own white paper, which was issued on the 16th of December last year, it references the case for change by PwC, and indeed only nationally a week or so ago, I think it was the CCN that published work demonstrating that obviously economies of scales are required. And I of course sit in another place as a leader of a district council, and the first thing that I would say is, and in fact I was at the district council's network conference down in Berkshire only last Thursday and Friday. Notwithstanding potentially the disagreements that the various leaders have on this particular issue, we work quite well together and collaboratively on a whole host of issues, and have done for all of my 15 plus years in senior leadership roles in county and district, and we have good relationships and we are respectful when we disagree, and one can't help but notice that some of the relationships across the country are a little more fractured than they are here in lovely Worcestershire. But for me, and I think it's really important that we bear in mind that as we go through this process, we're all going to be abolished, and there's going to be a new legal entity, and it's not about the county doing to districts at all. And it seems to me that having had several months now and a plethora of meetings between the leaders, it boils down to this. Do you have a one Worcestershire, a unitary Worcestershire, or do you have a north and a south? Now, as I've indicated, I'm also a district leader and I'm in the north of the county, but it seems to me, from a pragmatic, common sense approach, even before you look at the data and the data just says it all, the reality is this. And of course, big isn't always beautiful, but you need the economies of scale. And of course, you have to work also within the policy parameters that are set. And the government have been very clear that the minimum footprint for a unitary authority is 500,000. Now, I hear all of these kind of noises that the government might be shaky, and it's not top down, it has to be bottom up, and we have to get things right for your communities. But they haven't just plucked this figure out of the air. And indeed, data backs it up. And we're a population in Worcestershire of 600,000. And for me, the notion that we would dissect, and that's the word I'll use, our children's social care and our adult social care into a north and a south, frankly, is fanciful. There are huge, huge pressures on upper tier authorities in a shire county like ours on these demand-led services, and we will do our very best, even in a one unitary Worcestershire, if we can ensure that all of the services that are really important to residents can still be delivered. And I believe the best chance we have about preserving the services that most mean things to our communities, the sense of place, you know, the place shaping, parks, gardens, play areas, open spaces, all of those libraries, which I'm sure we would absolutely commit to in a unitary authority. We need to ensure they've got as much resource as they possibly can. And to try and dilute that into a lesser entity only puts more and more pressure on those matters. So in the outpost of Wyre Forest in the north of the county, very much agree with a whole one Worcestershire approach. And just briefly, if I may, just for another moment, Leader, you made a good point. You know, we've got getting on for 200 town and parish councils across this county. And many of those, particularly the larger towns, will really have an opportunity to come into their own, because I suspect that councils will want to ensure that some of those things that I've talked about, parks, play areas, parks, gardens, that are most important local communities, are safeguarded by elected members at a local level. And we're already in a very good place for that in Wyre Forest, because we've got 3 town councils already, and virtually the whole of Wyre Forest, with the exception of 200 electors, is already parished. And if I was in other parts of the county, I'd be wanting to ensure that at a local level, some of the things that residents and communities, parishes and elected members hold most dearly to themselves can stay at a local level. And I have to say that in all the circumstances, therefore, it strikes me that the only show in town, economically and strategically, is a one Worcestershire. As much as it pains me to effectively be made redundant in a couple of years' time from a district council that I love, I absolutely support this report and endorse the interim plan accordingly, Leader.
Thank you, Marcus, and thanks for bringing out those various points in a very, as always, a really excellent summary of the issues that are facing us. So I've got a series of speakers, and I'll just take them in turn, and then I want to bring in Tom from OSPB in terms of the feedback as well. So starting David Chambers.
Thank you, Leader. Really, just to pick up on a few points that Marcus has just raised. I completely support the paper that's before us today and the one Worcestershire way forward. And I say with obvious respect to our district council colleagues, but are some of our district council leaders seriously suggesting, for example, and Councillor Mackay will speak further, I'm sure, that we have 2 children's service authorities in Worcestershire? Are we going to have 2 education authorities? Are we going to have 2 home-school transport networks? And as a consequence of that, 2 transport departments? And with all the complexities around special educational needs and disabilities provision here in Worcestershire, are we really going to have 2 separate authorities that are going to provide that service across the county? In my view, this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. The cost implications alone are clear and are in the PwC report before us. The effectiveness on the services I genuinely fear for. Never mind the difficulties that if you have 2 unitary authorities, the difficulties there will be in recruiting appropriate additional staff in terms of social care and other officers. All this disruption and reduction in the quality of services, and for what? And I say with respect, to have more elected councillors? Well, it certainly will not be to secure better services for the citizens of Worcestershire.
I think make some excellent points, David, as always, and particularly on the education side. If you think of school catchment areas and the demands actually on school places that we're addressing and grappling with, and we're having to do that on the footprint of Worcestershire. If you split those, then obviously they're not going to be equally based. Also, would draw out for colleagues the issue that came up in terms of we don't face equal deprivation in north and south. We don't have an equal tax base, and so the resources but the demands aren't equal. It isn't as if we're slicing it in two and we're having equality. And one of the points in the government's letter, which I think was most telling, is that you shouldn't be seeking as part of this to create an advantage or a disadvantage for one or the other of the areas that you're seeking to unitarise, which I think is an important point. But I'm hogging this, so I shall keep going with my list of speakers, and I've got David Ross next.
Thank you, Leader, and good morning, everybody. I fully support the One Worcestershire approach, 100%, as I believe it's the only model that delivers essential services that residents expect and need. A two-council approach will result in a disaggregation of services, and in particular I turn to public health and the partnership it has with the NHS. This will be destroyed and be caused a disjoint between the public health at county level and the NHS and the delivery of our services. It will also cause a disjoint between demand and supply, because as people have already pointed out, the difference between a north and a south in terms of demand and supply. I believe it will actually end up, Leader, as a postcode lottery for your health services, should we go down a two-tier approach. Therefore, for me, I can only support the One Worcestershire approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I've got Mark next on the list. Mark.
Thank you, Simon. And I hope, as colleagues know, this will be my last appearance at Cabinet. People will forgive me if I just have a couple of words about something else first and then talk about the issue. It's been a pleasure working with you all, members and officers, here for 8 years, but in local government for 23, and it's taught me a lot. Local government is a fantastic place. It's something that not many people really know about and is often derided, but makes a huge difference to people's lives. So I wanted to say particularly a thank you to you, Simon, for the opportunity to serve here in your cabinet again. And also for your contributions to Worcestershire, and I don't think they're well understood I mean, the Southern Link Road, Parkway Station, the Hive, Keepax Bridge, Malvern Science Park, Kidderminster Station, Bromsgrove Station, Hoobrook Link Road. The list really does go on. You really have made the biggest improvements to infrastructure in this county in many decades, and I want to say thank you for your leadership. I've served under you for 18 years in different places, and you've made a significant contribution to Worcestershire, and I wish you particularly well in your re-election and your future. Turning to the subject at hand, I'm making no secret of it. I never wanted a unitary. When I joined Worcester City Council in 2002, the Chief Executive turned to me and said, "We're a district council. I don't know how long we'll be here for, but, enjoy it for a couple of years," type thing. And here we are 23 years later, and only now is there a realistic prospect of change. So I've never wanted it because of the locality focus that I think the two-tier system enables, and the protection of non-social care services, shall we say, that districts can do. However, this Labour government, while they didn't mention it in their manifesto, they have a very large majority, and they're going to be able to smash it through. So, you've got to make the best of these things. And what I know, having served here in the Cabinet for that period of time on 2 occasions, is that social care authorities face a terrible situation of demand massively outstripping supply in terms of resources, and that is only set to continue. And they say the proverb is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and successive governments wanting to be supportive and loved by the population continue to increase entitlements, and the age ranges in which services cover, and they never are able to fund those intentions. So they always, with the best will in the world, keep offering more and more to the public, But they, we've seen it, and we're seeing it again with this government, with free school breakfasts and things like that. They're extending the role of the state again and again and again, but not really having the finances to back it up. And so what you find is that local government up and down the country is increasingly unviable. And therefore, as a result of that, bigger and bigger councils are the solution that the government of the day is recognising is the only way forward, and it is, unfortunately, unless we're going to pay all a lot more tax and local government is going to be completely funded in a different way, then you've got to try and make the most viable council you can, and therefore, for me, that is only a Worcestershire 600,000 size council is remotely viable financially. If you go for 300,000 and two councils, you'll be in a Shropshire situation very quickly, where you've got no money, no reserves, and no base to which to raise any cash. And even at 600,000, the next council is if that's what comes forward, is going to find it really, really tough, because the demands continue to outpace the supply. So I think there is only one option. It does risk a very big area covering, and that lack of locality focus. But the alternative is that you've got local focus, but no money to do anything with, and social care will eat up every last penny of it. So that is why I'm supportive of the one Worcestershire proposal. The one other thing I wanted to say was about the role in the future of parish, town, and in Worcester's case, a city council, which will have, town council functions. Those will be increasingly important for the focus for local activity, for getting things done in a locality. They are unrestricted on their precept raising powers at this point. Whether that stays the same, I don't know. But we do need, any future map needs to make sure that that tier, there'll only be the two, is as effective and good as it can be. I've got 5 parishes in my division. They are really, really good, but not all parishes, councils are effective, and they will need all to be in the future. So for those reasons, I'm supporting the proposal before us today, and I hope that we will prevail, because Worcestershire needs a strong council that can deliver services in the future. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for your very kind remarks as well. I've got some remarks of my own to make at the end once we get to those, to thank colleagues that won't be with us in the new council. But the point that you draw out actually is something I did skip over in terms of PwC's refresh, and particularly the CCN, the County Councils Network, which we work closely with because they're very aligned to the services we provide. There are other county councils. Their analysis from the latest information is actually, if councils are based on around 300,000 number, the system's going to cost more. We may as well stay with a 2-tier system if we're simply looking at financial efficiency and effectiveness. It's not going to save any money. In fact, I think the analysis was it was over £800 million would have to be put in. Remember, those are only in 21 areas. It's not for the whole of England, many of which is already covered by unitaries. So, and they looked at what would happen if 400,000 was the basis, 5, 6, etc. And of a size of 500 or more, there are saving opportunities of £1.8 billion. £1.8 billion, an enormous sum of money. So whilst finances shouldn't be the deciding and the driving factor for every set of proposal, we have to respectfully, I think about the national context and the pressures facing any government in the UK. We know on the defence side, we know that we're living in a very changing and dynamic and unsafe world where the government's having to reprioritise. We know the difficult decisions any government's going to have to take, and we can see some of those things panning out. But we also need to reflect on the opportunities and not be downbeat, I think, in terms of a new authority, a brand new authority can do in terms of refashioning services and transforming and reforming, but also looking at that driving factor of the economy. How do you grow the size of of the cake, because only by growing the size of the cake and ultimately being able to produce more tax receipts by more successful businesses, more homes being built, etc., can I think you address the point that you're making, which is no councillor and no authority simply wants to deliver statutory services statutory minimum. It's not a job that anyone gets elected or any manager gets brought into local government inspired by simply doing the statutory minimum. So we come to work, I think, collective, whatever political party or none, for officers to do the best for Worcestershire and do those things which are really important. And unless I believe it's a Worcestershire footprint, the council of the future in Worcestershire won't be able to do that if it's divided up. So you, as always, Mark, will miss your excellent points in terms of an analysis and wider view, I think. Can I bring in Emma Stokes?
Thank you, Leader. And once again, I thank Councillor Tom Wells for allowing me to speak at the OSPB, and I do absolutely endorse any pre-scrutiny, and I take on board the comments that they made. I also thank him for allowing me to interrogate PricewaterhouseCoopers again and getting words like highly independent. I needed to be able to validate the purpose of their report because some people were doubting their integrity, which is a nonsense. I absolutely support a One Worcestershire. The footprint it manages covers 86% of its total spend. For those endorsing a two-unitary, they need to understand that they will not be two super districts and they cannot farm out adult social care, children's schooling, home-to-school transport and send. These are decisions which need to be made by elected members. And passing this to a trust means you do not deserve to stand for election. A good community leader is measured by how well you treat the vulnerable in society. By dividing the safe working practices for adult social care and children's services, not only puts our vulnerable in an incredibly precarious position, but it just highlights how much some members are pushing a two Worcestershire and are just sadly looking after their own political roles. The integrity of PricewaterhouseCoopers is not in question. It has historically supported the government for unitary decisions, so why should the government not listen to their own advisors? The only element we can legitimately consider today is the financial savings for Worcestershire, but also we can consider the savings for the country. You just indicated, Leader, that the savings to us as a county are 20 million, but 1.8 million to the Treasury. Once the Treasury see our One Worcestershire case, they will gladly take the succinct plan prepared by their own advisor and will thank us for our diligence, and it will be a quick win for the government. So to wind up, I absolutely support a One Worcester and I'm pleased to take this opportunity to support it. Thank you.
As always, Emma, bringing out some of those excellent points as well in terms of the backdrop of some of the national work and ultimately what would be the impact if the council collectively with our partners and ultimately through government would decide to split up the county, would probably people would pay higher taxes. That's a reality. And so to give you an impression of what 20 million means, well, a 1% council tax for us is about just over £3 million for doing my maths. And so, you know, that's a substantial rise potentially in council tax if we were not to be able to draw down those savings and we were having to meet them through council tax. Because the backdrop we haven't mentioned today is the current system is unviable. The current system in local government, and Mark alluded to it, has not got the resources to deliver SEND. We're all running overspends and deficits. It can't fund the services that we want to see today. So ultimately, we're still going to have those statutory duties. All things being equal, the council's going to have to deliver that. Still going to be inspected and regulated by Ofsted and by CQC for its adult social care in the future. It's going to have to deliver those. So if it wants to have those place-based services and deliver the kind of ambitious schemes that we've talked about, it's been a real privilege actually to lead this council and be able to see that, to be able to put a vision forward that we know in our hearts of heart we can deliver. A future council may not be able to do that. unless it's going to charge significantly increased rates of council tax. And so, as a council that is the third lowest for council tax of all county councils in the country, which I'm really proud of because it's hard-earned taxpayers' money that's being able to be spent by our residents as opposed to just simply funding services, a future council, if it was split, wouldn't be able to do that. Taxes would rise simply to fund an inefficient and ineffective organisation, which, as PwC said, and they were questioned at OSPB, as Emma said rightly, they were interrogated because it's their case that we're relying on. Ultimately, those issues are ongoing. It's not a one-off thing. You know, two councils have got to run for the future in terms of all those extra costs and all those overheads. So that's the weight really that we face, I think, of decision making and responsibility, not for a year or two, as Marcus said, but actually for a number of generations really, in terms of what's going to be decided by the government. So I shall move through my list of colleagues, and I've got Steve Mackay.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'll say from the outset that I fully support the idea of One Worcestershire. From my perspective of seeing children's and families' services being taken forward, I can only see a negative aspects if the county is split. Taking what will be a disruption of those amenities, it's right to examine what is likely to cause a fragmentation to the service. There will be an administrative separation. Currently, Worcestershire operates under a single county-wide system for child protection, fostering and social work. Splitting the county into separate unity authorities would mean different local policies, procedures and likely IT systems for case management. And most importantly, and what I'm most concerned of, is that multi-agency collaboration would be affected. Children's care services rely heavily on partnerships between social services, schools, healthcare providers, police and charities. For those working within that collaboration, this could lead to delays in information sharing, miscommunication between teams and gaps in service continuity, especially for those children who move between the two new authorities. And as to increased costs, establishing new administrative structures for separate authorities could well result in higher operational costs, diverting funds from frontline children's services. Worcestershire County Council has faced significant overspending in children's social care. Dividing the county could exacerbate these financial challenges, hindering the delivery of those essential services. And then consider a loss of expertise. Splitting the county must dilute the concentration of experienced professionals, leading to inconsistencies in service quality across the new authorities. Such a division could create administrative barriers to joint working, as different authorities may develop separate priorities, funding structures and operational models. Agencies covering the whole county, Worcestershire NHS or police, might struggle to coordinate effectively with two distinct social care departments. If one unitary authority has a higher funding or stronger leadership, it could offer better children's services than the other, which may create a postcode lottery where a child's care and support depend on where they live rather than their needs. Additionally, recruitment challenges could arise if one area struggles to attract skilled social workers, leading to inconsistencies in expertise and case handling. And as to gaps in specialist services, Worcestershire's existing children's service includes specialist support for children with disabilities, mental health needs, and those at risk of exploitation. If these services are split, smaller unitary authorities may lack the resources or demand to sustain certain specialist teams, leading to longer wait times or reduction in available support. In summary, Leader, fragmentation would stem from administrative separation, weakened collaboration, unequal resources and disruption to specialist services, all of which could negatively impact on vulnerable children in this county.
And again, some excellent points, Steve, because we must reflect on the journey we've been on, and by gum, it's been a journey of taking children's services from inadequate to good. I'll repeat that. We have good children's services in Worcestershire for the most vulnerable children in society and the families that we serve. And we're looking to make sure that we can support those families to keep together where they can, with obviously that support to keep children in a family setting. And when they do need to be taken to care, that we're encouraging loving families to come forward through the fostering network. So all of that work that actually there's been an enormous amount of work to achieve good, and to maintain good is something that I think any council needs to aspire to and make sure it delivers. Because if you can't deliver for the most vulnerable in society, what are you doing in operation? What is more important than that? And so I wouldn't want to see that potentially put at risk, which I think is a danger, is a risk, in taking a different approach and splitting up services. And we have experienced a company structure. It adds an overhead, it adds a level of bureaucracy, and it divorces the accountability from those elected people that serve Worcestershire and are accountable to the public. So I don't perceive that as an alternative either, and I think you make some excellent points there, Steve, as always. I want to bring in Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and good morning, Cabinet. Good morning. As you and many of my Cabinet colleagues are aware, I've always felt, never been afraid of saying that local government needed reform. And I think for some of the things that each person has said, we can clearly understand it. The pressures now are completely different to those that we've experienced previously. And we need reform for a new age and new opportunities as well, and to deliver integrated delivery of services. You talked about economic growth, and having the ability to provide the infrastructure and planning is a very simple way that you can get things done and get them done quicker. However, we need the right reform. And my total support is for a one Worcestershire Council for the reasons I will define in quite some detail as I elaborate on the dangers of self-interested voices calling for a north-south split. And this is as a northern member bordering the basket case of Labour-run Birmingham. We here stand at a crossroads. The future of local government in Worcestershire is clearly under discussion, and the decisions being made will determine the financial stability of our councils, the quality of services for residents, and the long-term identity of our county. The idea of splitting Worcestershire into north and south unitary authorities is not just impractical, it's actively dangerous. It risks creating two financially unstable councils, increasing costs, reducing service quality, and opening the door to outside interference that could strip away local control. Instead, we must support a one Worcestershire approach, a single unitary authority that preserves our county's integrity, ensures financial stability, and delivers, most importantly, the best services for our residents. And this isn't just my opinion. The independent options appraisal and interim plan that's conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is attached to the papers for this council meeting, and I fully recommend that all residents and businesses in Worcestershire read that document and have a full understanding of it. And this was commissioned as part of our due diligence, but it's also been done before. I saw a report from Dorset from 2019 with very, very similar outcomes, and they've also done the work for the CCN. And it makes it abundantly clear that splitting Worcestershire is the wrong move. And why? Well, because it fails on financial, service delivery, governance, and one Worcestershire is therefore the only logical solution. A council's financial health is based on two key factors: its revenue base and the cost of service provision. A North Worcestershire unitary, potentially, having heard from my Cabinet colleague, the leader at Warwick Forest, could be made up of just Redditch and Bromsgrove. It could face serious financial instability. The PwC report clearly outlines that the North has a lower council tax base, but higher demand for services such as social care. It would lack the financial resilience needed to cope with increasing service pressures. It would immediately face potentially a structural deficit, meaning higher costs, higher council tax, and fewer resources for residents. Meanwhile, a South Worcestershire unitary, covering Worcester, Malvern, Wychavon, who knows, even Wyre Forest, would have a stronger tax base, more financial stability, and greater investment potential. This could create a two-tier Worcestershire, where those in the south receive better for their services while the north struggles. And this isn't just conjecture, it's based on the hard financial modelling, and the PwC report is clear that a single unitary covering all of Worcestershire would be financially sustainable and efficient. A north-south split would result in increased costs, inefficiencies, and instability. The financial warning signs are flashing red, and if we ignore them, we're heading towards a major crisis. Higher costs, worse services, more bureaucracy. A key argument for reform is to reduce costs and bureaucracy, not increase them. But splitting Worcestershire does exactly the opposite. Two authorities mean two sets of leadership teams, as my colleague talked about, in terms of children's, adults, home to school transport and special education needs, which account for the vast proportion of costs that are spent in Worcestershire. And all of those executives will be on six-figure salaries. We are talking about reducing a large number of chief executives to one and a large number of senior leadership teams to one. But then to create two entities of the highest cost base is bordering on madness. So two authorities will mean two sets of leadership teams, two chief executives, two sets of senior managers, all on six-figure salaries. Two authorities means duplicate departments, duplicated back office functions and greater inefficiencies. Rather than saving money, I fully expect a split would actually cost taxpayers more. In contrast, a single unitary Worcestershire would deliver streamlined governance, cutting waste and reducing duplication, provide clear accountability so residents know exactly where the responsibility lies. I do remember the BBC showing the cakes and the residents trying to understand who does what. At least then they would have a clue. It will offer economies of scale and ensure efficient, cost-effective service delivery. The financial amounts in the PwC report are as is. The opportunities that would be available to us through economies of scale to go far, far further, and I think one of our colleagues recently suggested at least doubling those savings potentially, are there for the taking. What about the other problems? Service delivery risks. It's the most vulnerable that will suffer from this. The biggest change of a split Worcestershire is what happens to frontline services. Adult social care, children's services, SEND provision, and highways all benefit from economies of scale. Fragmenting these services would result in inconsistencies, reduced quality and increased costs. And residents in different parts of the county, as we've already heard, would experience different levels of service, a two-tier service, a postcode lottery. So let's just take one example, special educational needs. We currently operate an integrated county-wide SEND system and have put a huge amount of work, and we've heard of substantial investment that is going in from the budget that we reported. A split would mean starting from scratch, rebuilding those services, which will create disruption, confusion and delays for families who need help. And this is just not inefficient, it's morally wrong. The PwC report warns that reorganisation alone will not fix financial issues. If we get this wrong, it can make things worse, putting vulnerable residents at risk. As we heard from the leader at Wyre Forest today, the proposal for a north-south split that is being put forward by self-interested voices doesn't have their support. They are trying to push something and enforce something on an area that doesn't want it. It's like an episode of Game of Thrones, isn't it? The King of the North or the Queen of the North or whatever it's going to be. And if a split was to happen and the North was at war, perhaps Wyre Forest could join the South. Who knows? He's going to sit on this Game of Thrones. And this would leave North Worcestershire as just two districts, struggling to balance the books, provide services and attract investment, and go nowhere near the numbers that the government is asking for. Nowhere near. Worcestershire's history is one of cooperation, not fragmentation, and it makes no sense to force through a model that key areas don't want. And then we come on to my area, Whittle, bordering Birmingham. The Birmingham problem. A split Worcestershire does risk outside takeover. Right now, Birmingham City Council, and I can tell you, personal experience, walking the streets, bins and rats on one side, bins collected never without fail on the other, is in a financial and organisational crisis. And the government has to look at politically restructuring it. It doesn't work, it doesn't deliver for the residents of Birmingham, but continually returns the same Labour group in charge. It is not fair on the people of Birmingham, and the government is going to be looking at it. And if Redditch or Bromsgrove are left there as an unsustainable unitary, what could happen next? They could be forced into a Greater Birmingham model. Redditch is already a non-constituent member of the combined authority. Those links are there. They've been reported. People have openly said they want to move into that direction. And in that case, Worcestershire's identity will be lost forever. And my residents are aghast at the possibilities, minor and low as they are, of this happening. And there is a real risk, and it must be taken seriously. But by contrast, a one Worcestershire approach keeps decision making in Worcestershire for Worcestershire. And the government's own criteria is to support that. The Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities has made it clear unitary councils should have populations of at least 500,000 to be sustainable. Now, there's a stack of flip-flopping because 2 Labour MPs have gone crying to the Minister saying, what are we going to do to actually sustain this? But a single Worcestershire unitary will have 614,000 residents perfectly aligned within these guidelines, and a North Worcestershire unitary will have less than 300,000. The one Worcestershire model is the only option that meets government criteria for viability. And clearly there's going to be further discussion when we get to the mayoral areas on what makes up the required 1.5 million residents. But for now, my conclusion is clear. The evidence is undeniable. Splitting Worcestershire into 2 unitaries would be a financial, operational and governance disaster. It would increase costs, reduce service quality and leave the North struggling. A one Worcestershire approach is the only way forward. It keeps our county strong, united and financially sustainable, and it safeguards our services and prevents unwanted interference from other areas. This is a moment of leadership. It's a moment to stand up for Worcestershire's future. Let's reject division. Let's keep Worcestershire strong, and let's make the right choice and keep our county together. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And you made some very powerful and compelling points, particularly in relation to, and actually it started to be brought out, I thought, at OSPB, that these are our views we're submitting to the government, but we won't make a decision. Worcestershire, whether it's at a district or a county level, won't make the choice. The government will make the choice. And we don't know whether there'll be further rounds of unitarisation, because there were intimations, in fact, on the initial point, that small or failing unitaries would potentially be looked at to how they make sustainable governments for the future. So there is a risk that obviously if the government was to come back to some of those authorities that, as they describe, small or failing, whichever they are, that obviously that could lead to a further reorganisation if Worcestershire, broken up, was unsuccessful. And it was a point actually that one of our colleagues brought out at OSPB, and I thought it was well made. You also make some excellent points about staffing. Ultimately, it's difficult to get the right people to do the jobs that we need at the moment. And so dividing services actually means that we need more of those best and brightest people to lead our services at all levels, but particularly in terms of those leadership positions that we know are really important in terms of the shadow they create in the authority and the way that we move forward. And there are clearly examples of where authorities are not succeeding. And so one of the points that I made at OSPB is we need to learn from those areas that have gone unitary. And there is some evidence base, I think, that's emerging and being referred to, that the size of the authority does make a difference in terms of its viability, both in terms of its tax base, but also its service demand. And that those services and demands and tax raising capability are not equal across Worcestershire. They're not equal. So once you start splitting them, you can create potentially an area that might thrive and an area that won't. And so those points were brought out in debate, and you certainly bring them out very passionately and rightly so. I think the last point I'd make, colleagues, is going back to the economy. See, I believe in growing the economy. I think economic growth is good and prosperity is good, and providing people with a brighter future to be able to get the jobs that they require in the future, that are going to pay higher salaries, higher value-added industries and sectors are important. The Unitary Authority, or Unitary Worcestershire, will bring together some of those functions, whether it be planning, whether it be transport, whether it be obviously education, skills, and we can plan across the county. So there won't be that pressure to be able to put maybe housing in an unsustainable position or unsustainable locations. You can look at the strategic network, you can look at where you've got that transport connectivity that Mark brought out in his speech, that we've really spent a lot of money improving. So why aren't we sweating that asset? Why aren't we putting the housing and the jobs and facilities in the right locations and being able to plan across the county? That's not an opportunity, of course, if we have a segregation and division of Worcestershire. So, as always, we align quite closely on those points. Richard.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. And I think I'm the last Cabinet member to speak. So everything's already been said, hasn't it, in many ways. There are a few things I would like to touch on, and I did speak on these matters last night at Witchhaven and at OSPB the other day. And I would like to thank, like Emma did, Tom, for allowing me to speak at OSPB and say I thought the meeting was really well chaired. So thank you, Tom, for what you did. The point I want to make, I was fortunate to go to a conference recently put on by the LGA. I know some other colleagues attended as well. But going on this journey, I wanted to know what other areas had experienced and what they had to give and to learn from, really. So I spoke with some members from Cumbria, and Cumbria chose to go with a two unitary setup to split the county. And they were quite candid and said there were no savings made. They believe it was the right choice for them in a geographic and political way. But they said there were no savings at all that were made. And indeed, they encountered costs. And we know where those costs were, don't we, with adult social care and children's services in terms of creating them. And we know that splitting it, all the arguments have been said about splitting and the difficulties with that, and the arguments again with a trust. Why go for a trust? If you're going for one unitary, you might as well have it within house and save it. The difficulty splitting is you don't get rid of the issues of the budget. That is still there, but it's within two divisions and probably more. On the other hand, I spoke with the past leader of Somerset area when he took it to unitary. And he said they made significant savings, and he did also say that if he'd been stronger, he could have made even more savings in what they managed to do. But being a passionate Droitwich councillor and Witchhaven councillor, I asked him, what about the communities and the place? And he said within the framework of the Somerset Unitary, they set up community boards that had that place element still there. So he believed that the place aspect was still being met sufficiently. I asked him about planning as well, and indeed they replicated the district planning under the one unitary planning by having different planning boards. So again, within planning, you maintained that locality and that knowledge in what they were doing. I think also, the OSPB have brought out a big point there on point 10, being mindful of the importance that a single unitary option is not seen as a Worcestershire takeover. And I did ask the past leader of Somerset about that, about the county, and he did talk about the difficulties of districts and county in getting to the solution of one unitary, although they believe now it's totally right. But he said you have to aim for the best. You aim for the best in each of the districts that operate. We have some fantastic districts, and there's a lot to be taken forward where even they could learn of that best practice amongst themselves. And by having the one unitary, you can collect that into that best practice. Aim for the lowest council tax, possibly not always going to be achievable, but he said it was important that no area felt a negativity by moving to a unitary as much as you could. So you're aiming for the best in everything you do. We know that this is a top-down direction from government, but I honestly think we have to seize the opportunity. It's not often that you get the chance to re-engineer public services and to aim them directly at the benefit of a resident. And I think we do have that opportunity, and we need to get over this hurdle of one unitary, two unitary, and get on to that redefining our public services for our locality. And I believe the best way to do that is one Worcestershire.
And I think that I just want to draw out that final point, because I think the opportunity, people say, well, why don't you just continue to work for the next 6, 7, 8 months or whatever it is on multiple options and more work? Well, there's an opportunity cost of time and resources and people. And ultimately what we're saying is we want to deploy that to actually reimagine Worcestershire in that time. How can a Worcestershire council deliver for the citizens and the businesses that we serve, and to use that resource to actually look at the transformation opportunities, how you pull those fragmented services together to deliver that overall vision for an area. And ultimately that won't be done if those precious resources of time and budget and expertise are deployed looking at scenarios which patently don't meet the model and don't meet the criteria. So there's a big opportunity cost that I don't want the council to lose, which is the reimagining of Worcestershire, and how it can look and feel, and how you get that community governance, whether it be through the bodies like town and parish councils, or indeed the community boards that you talk about. And I think the council needs to get out as well, and to talk to, as you said, other parts that have gone through this in the not too distant past, to see what the learning points are. What would they do differently? What are the things that the takeaways, if you like? What are the things that really worked? And so I think there's a real opportunity that in the new council that we need to focus on that, so that it isn't just safe and legal, which is obviously the absolute essential part, but actually that transformation opportunity for the citizens we serve isn't lost, because you don't get these opportunities many times, colleagues. You probably get them once in any lifetime to really reimagine services, and I don't want Worcestershire to lose that opportunity. Now, we've all had our views and says, which is absolutely right, but I want to bring in Tom, and I want to say some remarks about Tom's leadership of OSPB and thank him over the time that I've been leader and he's been OSPB chair in this term, because I think he's been very fair and diligent, and he's made sure that the meetings are committed to having that debate. And that hasn't always been the case in some parts of the country, but we do have a really good scrutiny system in Worcestershire. It has those panels, it has the OSPB operation, and that's important in terms of good governance of an authority. And I thank you, Tom, for all the work you've done there. Tom, do you want to take us through your panel?
Chairman, if I may, and good morning, and welcome to this little microclimate that is Malvern. It's always like this. Chair, I also note that looking around your cabinet colleagues, half of them started on OSPB. So I think it was obviously a very good nursery there, or somewhat might say relegation for those members, whichever way you look at cabinet and scrutiny. Chairman, first of all, I share your thoughts about the opportunity that this creates for a fresh start, for a new vision, a clean piece of paper. I recall a similar sense of uplift at the time of the separation of Herefordshire and Worcestershire in 1997. I was elected to the new Worcestershire Council at that point, and I recall my first meeting at County Hall. I was ushered into one room which said Worcestershire. Had one room in County Hall. And Hereford and Worcester continued to, operate for the best part of the next 12 months. But it was a new start, and it was a clean piece of paper. And I remember the first thing we had to do was appoint a chief exec. We hadn't got any officers. We hadn't got any logos either. We had to research the various crests for Worcestershire over the years, and I think there were 3 that we could choose from going back in the mists of time. So I do share your enthusiasm for this opportunity, and let's talk it up rather than talk it down. If I may, I just want to pick up a couple of points. So we didn't get into the discussion about single unitary or 2 unitaries. We circumvented that discussion and went on to other issues that might help you guys in the months ahead. So first of all, we welcome the commitment that was made yesterday, and I think it's in your cabinet report anyway, of a full council debate on this before the submission on the 28th of November. So that's absolutely welcomed. The second point I was kind of interested in, because I wasn't expecting the answer we were given. So the question was, would a new administration, if there is such a thing, in May, have the opportunity to reframe the council's response? And the response we received was that yes, well, they'd have to work pretty quickly, but potentially they could. And I found that quite interesting, because it's only 6 weeks away, 7 weeks away, whatever it is. So that was interesting. The issue about town councils and parish councils, that tier of government, has been picked up on, I think, by a number of speakers this morning already. I attend 13 parish councils, and they are at the moment waiting for some information flow to understand what role they may have in this new reconfiguration of local government in Worcestershire, particularly the town councils. Both town and district, town and parish, obviously, as we all know, are populated by volunteers, and we need to respect that fact. So I think there needs to be some thought in the next month or two about how we work with our town and parish councils to provide any information that we may have and then pass it on in a timely manner. There were a few small errors in the report. I think from memory it said that the chief exec of Wyre Forest and Wychhaven were the same person. I don't think that's true. So there's a few, you could almost come typos, just factual things which weren't quite right. But that shouldn't get in the way of what was an excellent report. The issue of staff morale was raised yesterday, and it hasn't been touched on today yet. And I think it's a really important point for us as members. Those of us who are successful in the election in May will need to think very carefully about what we can put in place to ensure that staff morale in these 2 years ahead is properly considered. And secondly, an associated point, that we don't end up with a sense of inertia for 2 years while we simply mind the operation without actually doing very much. And you know, there's 2 years ahead. In fact, there's 3 years ahead, isn't there, for Worcestershire to continue to deliver excellent services. And it shouldn't be, that focus shouldn't disappear just because of the government organisation in Worcestershire beyond that point. So we need to think about that too, I think. And obviously, new members elected in May, they will not be, I don't think, thinking about long-term strategies or policies. So in any kind of meaningful way. So the usual 5-year, 10-year strategies that we dine on at full council meetings, clearly that won't be the case, I don't think. So we need to, I guess in the induction process in May, think about what we tell and manage expectations for new members joining Worcestershire at that point. We do need to continue to be clear about the imposition of what's called devolution, but I'm sceptical about that word. Reorganisation might be a better word. And people asked me only last night in the parish council, so why are you doing this, Tom? And the answer is, well, that was something that the local government family in Worcestershire hadn't suddenly put to the top of its agenda, but was something we had to embrace. It was non-negotiable, and that's what we're doing. The final thing I just want to raise is and it was mentioned a moment ago by Richard actually, about the accusation in some quarters that if we're not careful, this will be seen as a Worcestershire takeover. Whether it's a new Worcestershire or a new North and South Worcestershire, it's a new authority. And there should and we need to manage as county councillors, we need to manage that messaging to ensure that whoever's elected to the new authority in 2 years' time doesn't feel as though, well, this is just Worcestershire with a couple of bolt-ons, planning and refuse collection and stuff. So we need to get that messaging really clear and actually mean it when we say that, that this is not a Worcestershire takeover. This is actually a collaboration of 7 councils across Worcestershire. So, Chairman, that's it. Thank you for your kind words. It's been a pleasure to be the Overview and Scrutiny Chairman for the last 4 years. I didn't expect to be. I've tried to do it in a non-partisan way. I've rebuked any councillor who has gone down the political accusation stuff, and as indeed I did yesterday. I was never going to accept the politicisation of scrutiny, and I've worked quite hard to ensure that's not the case, and that we work hard to ensure that we have clear evidence-based recommendations to you, and we're pleased that more often than not you've embraced them as a cabinet. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I think we're just for formal record, we obviously take on board the points, the very thoughtful reflections on those, and as I've made clear to colleagues on numerous occasions, we're being abolished too. So it's not something that it's not a takeover. It's all the authorities in Worcestershire being abolished, and the opportunity to create a brand new authority. And the point about staff, absolutely right. We brought that out in the discussion. How do we make sure regular briefings, engagement, that people come on this journey? Yes, they feel the optimism, but ultimately there's going to be some trepidation too, and there will be in the member corps as well, and in particularly in leadership positions, both on the member and the officer side at different regards, and obviously in our partners. So there's a hell of a lot of work to do for the new council to get to a position where they can submit a full business case in the late autumn, but that will be one of the principal things for the new authority. It won't be about creating the next corporate plan and all the stuff that we normally do, whilst new authority has an ability to reflect on its position, I think is the sort of thing, and but it won't change the interim plan. The interim plans will be submitted as they are. But I'm just going to see David wants to make a final comment, and then I'll just want to bring it to a summary.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just one final point, if I may. Just to say, it's such a great pleasure to be back in this council chamber, where I served for 8 years as a district council. I remember only too well being in a minority, and it often felt like a majority of one, where when I was leader of Malvern Hills District Council, I dare I say it, I supported a unitary authority. I also remember, Leader, being in a minority at a Worcestershire Leaders Board meeting at which, of course, you were present. My views have not changed, and I very much hope the Minister will approve our proposals for a One Worcestershire Unitary Council. And assuming he does, then I wish it well, and I believe it will serve our residents in the best possible way. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, so we've had numerous conversations over the years, a number of us, about whether the change is required at this point. But I think, and Tom brought it out in his comments, this has never been the top priority for leaders of any authority in Worcestershire collectively. We haven't started this. We didn't sort of bring it forward as a top priority. But having governments fired the starting gun, and it's clear it's going to happen, and so we've got to seize the opportunity to make of it the best authority that we can for people. And I think that's genuinely felt actually across Worcestershire. So I just want to bring in some factual points, because there were a couple of factual points that came up, and it's always irritating when a particular typo or a particular issue creeps into a report, and Hazel is very good at just drawing those out and correcting them before we make the decision.
Thank you. Yes, so what I'll propose actually is for the recommendation D, which is giving the authority to the Chief Executive to submit it, that we just add on to the end that the Chief Executive would be authorised to make minor factual amendments in consultation with you, Leader. So on page 19 of the PwC Options Appraisal Report, which is on page 35 of your agenda pack, references made, we've rewritten history for Councillor Hart, where it suggests that services are shared by Wyre Forest and Wychhaven. So Wyre Forest would be replaced with Malvern, and on the same page there's reference to county-wide shared services, then underneath a reference to the North Worcestershire Economic Development and Regeneration Services. So that reference would be removed as not being to county-wide. There may be just a couple of other minor factual, and we will amend those in consultation with you before it is submitted.
And I would only make factual changes. I think River would be very clear on that. So there's a slight wording amendment there, which I'm sure Marcus as the seconder will accept. But yeah, so we will accept those. Colleagues, do we feel this is something that we can approve today and recommend in all its gusto and glory to government? Yeah, we're all agreed. And as my final remarks, as the Chair of the Cabinet and the Leader of the Council, I just want to thank colleagues that are standing down at this election, and particularly colleagues of the Cabinet, Steve, Mark and David Chambers, that have decided not to continue to serve. and I want to thank each of them for the service to the Cabinet, but to the Council and for the people of Worcestershire in terms of the various roles they've held, not just in the Cabinet, but actually in terms of their service to the authority over a quite extended period collectively. And it's been a real pleasure to actually work together as a team, and we are a team, the Cabinet, to bat for Worcestershire. And to team ladle those issues and take them forward. And I'm really proud, actually, of what this council has achieved for Worcestershire, both in its service delivery, its place shaping, working with colleagues across the spectrum. I think it's a model that it makes the most efficient and effective use of resources that we have, which are very precious. But thank you, colleagues, really deeply felt for me in terms of the work that you've all done. And finally, to officers, it's been a real pleasure to work with a group of really professional, dedicated public servants in Worcestershire that labour each and every day, actually, to make sure that we can deliver those plans. Because it's one thing as a leader of the council and a cabinet to come up with a vision and to work with the public to shape that, but it's a whole organisation and the community that helps deliver that. And in Worcestershire, we've got that track record of delivery, and I wish the new council well in terms of taking on the challenges that remain, and there always are challenges in any system that need to be addressed. So thank you, colleagues. Thank you for your dedication to serve the people of Worcestershire. And have a very good day in sunny Malvern.